If you or your loved one needed an organ transplant to survive, how far would you go?
Barely seen on the surface, the illegal organ trade is deeply dangerous and global in scope.
Driven by desperation and misery, thousands of donors and recipients are taking part in a vast organ trade every year.
Among the poorest people on Earth are prepared to carve up their own bodies in exchange for money.
And these are the scars of the trade. Deeply in debt, this 21-year-old says he sold his kidney for £4,000.
For journalists, delving into dark and murky worlds is nothing new. But for LA Times foreign correspondent Shashank Bengali, his reporting on the illicit trade in kidneys created a scenario he'd never experienced before. He started getting a flood of texts and emails from people mistakenly believing he was a kidney broker. Bengali wrote about what's happened in the LA Times this week. We've reached him in New Delhi. So, Shashank, journalists write stories all the time. It's what we do, and people don't necessarily then confuse us with the characters in the stories. Why did this happen?
It was very strange, Diana. I just started to get every so often, every week or so, a message from somebody saying, help me sell my kidney, I want to sell my kidney. And I'd done a couple of stories. I'd done one story from India about a kidney racket that was busted. I'd done a story from Iran about how people are trying to sell their kidneys through a government system that doesn't always work as advertised. It took me a little while to realize that these people were emailing me because if I Googled actually sell kidney, two of my stories popped up fairly early in the Google search. And so people were coming to me because they were Googling how to sell their own kidneys, and there I was, and my email address was on the stories, as they often are with stories that journalists write these days. So I had kind of been, caught up in this, and people who didn't have a full grasp of English, these were people writing from India, from Iran, from different countries. English was not their first language, and they probably didn't realize my role was as a journalist and not as a broker.
And how difficult was this on an emotional level to know that these people were so desperate, they're reaching out to you, and then you're in a position of having to say to them, look, I'm not that guy, I'm not a kidney broker, and you're really not able to help them through whatever it is they're going through that makes them reach out to you?
Yeah, I began to feel this weird combination of curiosity and guilt. On one hand, as a reporter, someone, you're used to sort of going and seeking out people in difficult circumstances. As a journalist, often you catch people at low points in their lives and write about them. But now they were approaching me and showing up in my email unsolicited. So I had this combination of curiosity, but also guilt, because when I did speak with them, I had to pretty quickly come to the idea that I couldn't help them, that, selling a kidney is illegal in almost every country in the world. I can't really condone, illegal organ sales. I have no access to any kind of organ selling networks. I'm not that guy. I'm just a reporter who happens to be, writing about these issues.
It's certainly an unintended consequence of your work.
Yeah, I think nowadays, because of the, ubiquity of internet services and mobile internet, and everybody has a WhatsApp and a Facebook account, people in desperate circumstances have just the same amount of access to the web as you do, and they can find you. And so just because you write about somebody doesn't mean that that's the end of the relationship. They can come find you, talk to you, seek you out, beg for your help again. And it does kind of make the job of a journalist, that sort of detachment you want is much harder to achieve. And it's something that we have to grapple with as people who work in countries with struggling populations many times.
Really interesting to talk to you. Thank you.
My pleasure.